All right, welcome back to Locked in My Office. In today's episode, I'm talking with Tucker and Dennis about a cultural phenomena. If you haven't played with it, you've at least heard of it. And if you haven't heard of it, well, you're probably living under a rock because we're talking about Lego. And in this conversation, we kind of talk about more of the philosophical things about what Lego means to you, but also some of the practical things and some interesting little tidbits and factoids. And it's really just a celebration of Lego because it means a lot to a lot of people at Michigan Tech. And so even if you're not a seasoned Lego person, just a hobbyist or just kind of interested, this podcast might be a good thing for you to listen to, just to kind of hear what some of our Lego experts at Michigan Tech are up to. But also I figured I might as well share, and maybe I'll have this be a continuing thing, is I know what I'm going to be, I know what the next week's episode is going to be, and so I'll just give you a preview, right? I'm going to be meeting with Holly Hassel, and we're going to be talking about her recent experience on Jeopardy! She was a contestant on the show, and so we're going to ask some questions to kind of look behind the curtain there, so that should be interesting. And as always, feel free to go to oberlawyer.com/limo, oberloier.com/limo, and you can recommend a guest that you might want to see on the show or questions or topics that you might want to see discussed, and we'd be happy to at least consider it. So without further ado,
all right. So I'm super excited about today's episode because with me today I've got...
So I'm Tucker Nielsen. I'm currently in my second year of my master's program here at Michigan Tech. I graduated back in 22 with a bachelor's in English, and now I am working to actually do a thesis project in terms of incorporating Lego bricks into writing classrooms. So hopefully students that may struggle with writing programs can feel a bit more at ease when they're using material they're closer knowing about, like Lego bricks.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Dennis Levesey. I work at the University in the College of Computing, and I'm a big old AFOL, an adult fan of Lego.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised that there was an acronym for that. But yeah, so what we're talking about today is Lego, right? We're kind of, that's the whole theme today, and so I'm super excited. So I think just to kind of get started out, right, I asked you two to be on the podcast because I know that Lego has a very special spot in your heart. And I want to know, what does Lego mean to you as a very abstract sort of question? Well, whichever one you want to start.
I'll jump in. I got a few more years than Tucker does on me, and in those years, what Lego means to me has really evolved. As a kid, it was a toy. It was fun, right? It was, it was cars and trucks and maybe spaceships and a little bit of creativity. Now it's a medium. To me, Lego is a medium to express artistic ideas, creativity ideas. It's a way that I like to tell stories, and I have a really sort of, like George Costanza, I always wanted to pretend to be an architect. And so I have a real fondness, a sort of an amateur interest in architecture. And we can get into that later. But that is reflected within my Lego passion. And I use these plastic bricks, what some people might refer to as toys, to do that. And it's a way of getting away from work and stress of life and just sort of being creative.
So just like a woodworker has wood and a potter has clay, you have Lego.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool. What about you, Tucker?
Yeah, so even though I certainly do not have as much experience as Dennis, I can certainly agree with a lot of the sentiments, especially with Lego being a medium. And oftentimes I've seen it perceived mainly as a toy because, in fairness, it did start out as a plastic toy. However, we've seen just how much it's really evolved over years, and especially with me personally working with it as an art form now, I really see it as a way of bridging imagination to reality. Similar to how words may be used or art may be used, it's just another one of those materials that can really unlock ideas that may otherwise not be able to be expressed. It can also be used to really replicate the world and change the way that we really understand the world.
So you brought up the idea of like Lego is an evolving thing, and actually it seems like in like the last 5-ish years, and maybe this is like wrong for me to say, but it seems like there's some degree of a renaissance going on in terms of like just even like the artistry levels of the models and things like that. And I'm curious what you guys think about that, because you probably know more than me.
So for those who aren't watching this, I have in my hand sort of the simplest or most common Lego building block. And it's a block. And it's got 2 studs on one dimension and 4 on the other. So we call that a 2x4 brick. And this is sort of, this is the classic Lego element. And the patent drawings from the 50s are built on this one right here. Lego was not the first company to have sort of studded building blocks. They perfected the manufacturing, and they perfected something called clutch power, which we can get into later if we want, which is how these tubes on the inside allow them to really stick together well. But yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I had bags of different, if I had 4 or 5 different colors of these, and maybe some 2x2s and 1x1s, but they're all bricks. These days, the Lego elements have evolved into all kinds of crazy different shapes and structures, but there's a commonality and an integration within them, so that anything that is sort of tube shaped will fit together within a clip, whether it be a minifig hand or this clip here. And there's been an exponential explosion, if we want to get mathematical about it, in the numbers of ways of connecting 2 different pieces together, 2 different elements together, what we call contact points. And so, you start off by building vertically, but now you have elements that have bricks with studs on the side. You have and you have all this complexity, and so now you have a lot more ways of combining things together, types of elements you combine together. Coupled with the pandemic, which people were at home looking for things to do, coupled with the TV show Lego Masters, coupled with just the complexity and evolution with the product that Lego was producing, there has been this, you're right, it really is sort of this explosion in creativity, and Lego is increasingly not shying away from selling bigger and bigger sets, the big Star Wars sets, the Eiffel Tower, which is yay tall, and for those who can't see me, it's like 4.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
Or something. And so there's been I look at my builds from 5 years ago, and they're really pedestrian compared to what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I think the other thing I always joke to my wife about is that Lego is like the best money extraction device ever. And I think that's one of the corporate things that Lego may have figured out, is that their fan base is aging, and they have jobs, and they can afford some of these bigger things, and that's why we're seeing some of these bigger, more crazy models.
There's an interesting aside, which is some people may have heard the statistic that Lego is a better investment value than gold over the last N years.
I've heard that before, yeah.
And it's true if you cherry pick the data, right? If you're sort of randomly sampling all the product that Lego produces, it's not true. Yeah. But if you randomly sample, those big expensive sets that they have a finite shelf life on, and then the aftermarket, they have these exorbitant prices. There is a number of people who they usually use it to fund their Lego addiction, but money can be made through hoarding sets and then selling them later on. So it's an interesting little aside.
Yeah. Tucker, have you noticed any interesting evolutions since you've been using it?
So I've been building pretty much since the mid to late 2000s, and so I've definitely been part of just seeing how different these parts have changed over the years. As Dennis pointed out, going from just your basic blocks to all these different connection points. And I've been really realizing just how many different shapes are out on the market now. You have everything from little candle pieces to these very extravagant slopes. And even the minifigure parts themselves have gotten pretty extravagant and honestly a bit more representative. I've noticed that there are a lot more prosthetic limbs that are being produced, a lot of different hearing aids, different skin colors that the plastics.
As someone with like vitiligo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool to see that, and I think it's just reflecting just how much more complex the world is getting, and in addition, just how much more Lego is realizing just the importance of growing with the audience and just having these shapes out there and these different representations that can ultimately improve one's building experience.
And some Lego fans are going to hate me saying this, but a lot of the evolution within Lego has been driven by the competition.
Yeah.
So Mega Bloks, which is a competitor, and it's built on the same overall style. They're compatible with Lego bricks. They're not of the same quality, but they've had a lot more interesting types of connection points and elements that Lego has not done. And Lego has been catching up and trying to increasingly, they were copied for the longest time. Now they're sort of copying some of those.
Yeah.
And another interesting piece is that the manufacturing quality of some of the non-Lego products has really, really improved, especially for some of these things you can buy off of Amazon or Alibaba from China.
Yeah.
And you can end up buying Lego compatible elements at much more economical. And I will admit that I have done that, especially in some of the greenery and landscapes, the forest I have.
Yeah. Well, so what, I actually have two questions, but one is, I already forgot one of the questions. The other question I was thinking is, right, so kind of back to the idea of all of the parts that are now available, are there any like other Lego enthusiasts that think that Lego is like getting out of control with the amount of parts? Like, because sometimes I think about that, like there's so many. I used to think that Lego was trying to make the most amount of sets with the fewest unique parts, right? And I get that they don't add a bunch of parts like all at once, like it's always special when there's a new part in a set. But it still seems like now the library parts is so big that, do you get what I'm saying? Is there anyone that feels that way, or?
Honestly, I don't really see it as a big issue because Lego's always been that kind of company that wants to go out and try new things. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. Take, for example, Galador, their attempt at getting into the action figure market before they realized how Bionicle worked. It was a complete failure, but they made so many new parts for that. They tried it out. It didn't work. But then Bionicle came along. They realized that they could use some of the similar connections but modify the parts a bit. And it ended up pretty much pulling the company out of the 2004 sort of recession they found themselves in. And so for me, I think it's really good that Lego is trying to branch out more, even if they're copying a little bit from the competition, admittedly. I think just the way that they're using the parts in order to just create more ideas, create more representations, and just really show people just where they can really take their Lego building. And that's just no longer the blocky structures of the past.
Yeah.
It's not the first time I've heard that, though. I have heard that criticism. And mostly I hear that criticism for people who sort of have a passing interest or familiarity with Lego. The hardcore AFOLs who are building, I mean, we got a laundry list of things that we want. And for the longest time, the holy grail piece that Lego had never produced was a 1x5 plate. And if you talked about something that was a 1x5, it was sort of an impossible dream.
Yeah.
That we now have that plate.
Because previously you'd have to use a 1x4 and then a 1x1.
Exactly. Or a kind of a unique Technic piece, which that you could sometimes had the same distance, but it wasn't just a straight plate. Some of you will know what that means, and some of you just trust me. There's a distinction there. And so in the hardcore Lego community, there is a set of type of elements that people are sort of wishing that Lego would produce, and many of them had been driven. And Lego is not copying a ton from the competition, but some of the ones most recently have been things that the competitors use that we kept saying, Lego, it would be great if you could do this. And to Lego's credit, when they do come up with a new element, they have a plan for how to get it out into circulation. It won't just show up in one set. It'll show up across their whole inventory, and in some cases will be purposefully sort of enriched within sets, so they can get it out into the native lands and into the people like us who want to build with it. Where, taking your original question, where you do hear criticism from the Lego community is from people who are sort of completist. I want to buy all of the
Every
Lego
set,
Star Wars
yeah.
sets,
Yeah.
or I want to buy all the Lego City sets. And right now, Lego is producing so many sets that there. You would have to be more than independently wealthy. You would have to be very wealthy.
Yeah.
Maybe independently wealthy is good enough, but you have to be fairly well off to be able to buy everything that Lego's producing right now. Yeah. Because Lego is now they're realizing that they have multiple audiences that they're trying to sell to, and those audiences don't always overlap, whereas it was much narrower in the past. And so you could buy, maybe a wave might have 4 or 5 sets, and they would do one wave a year. You could sort of swing that. They're producing, I don't know what the latest number is, 250 sets a year?
I'd say about,
the order
yeah.
of, yeah.
And some of which are, they've not crossed the $1,000 barrier yet, but they will soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Getting there.
Yeah. I didn't do my job. I told you I was going to say this and I forgot because I was going to bring up. So I remember seeing a YouTube video where there's a warehouse that has doesn't Lego have a warehouse of every single model or something along those lines?
It's at the Lego house.
Yeah.
It's so in Billund.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was going to bring up the idea of you could either be independently wealthy or a really good thief, right? You could go there and steal everything. And that reminded me that I need to tell you guys that you're not protected from any self-incrimination. B, if you're in any sort of trouble, I'll report it. And 3, anything we talk about does not necessarily reflect the views of Michigan Tech. So Michigan Tech may or may not like Legos as an official stance.
The university did come to my house and take an image of my 10-foot by 10-foot Lego city.
Yeah.
And it was used in the most recent Tech magazine.
I remember seeing that. So that's an endorsement to some degree. So
yeah. I mean, it was it's fun showing faculty and administrators who have lives outside of their academy and their scholarly work. Yeah. And then we did put together some shorts that we were going to try to sort of do stop motion animation. For like a TikTok video, and I actually never saw if it actually ever made it or not. But the university was talking about doing it.
Yeah,
the UMC folks were over there doing it with us.
Can you, real quick, see if you can find the picture? Just an arrow key over, and you might be able to find it.
Yeah, let's see here. So that's sort of what I think of as the best shot of my city right there. And that's a shot where you can see sort of more of it, and so that's our most recent set that came out. Actually, I'll go back to that one.
Wait, is that Back to the Future? Or no, it's the museum set, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the most recent museum set that just came out. But next to it is my train station. I'm not sure how I make it stop.
I'm not sure why it's rotating.
But that train station is sort of, it was built as sort of an amalgamation of the Kansas City Grand Central Station and the Denver Grand Central Station. Both of them are sort of white limestone, but the Denver one has in this red script letter across the top, "Travel by train," in this cursive script. And I tried making that with Lego, but the red against the white really it's a nice juxtaposition. But I couldn't do it. So on mine, if we can find it again, you can maybe see it right there. There's just a little bit of a little red train right there on top, and so you just get that contrast of color.
Yeah.
What right? So the idea of having all these parts, where do you get started if you want to start making your own setup? Like, where do you get started to get these parts, or what advice can you give to someone who might want to start doing Lego models like this?
Well, I would say certainly one of the best ways to really break into Lego building, certainly look at, first off, any lower end creator sets. Honestly, some of the builds in those creator sets, especially from $10 to $50, there's some really cool techniques that are used, some really great parts. It's a great way to really start building up your inventory on a good budget. Certainly, if you're looking at building models, that would be a great place to start. There's also free software out there on the internet. I use one particular called Studio for a couple of my larger creations that I would not be able to afford in real life.
That was Studio?
Yeah, so it's like Studio 2.0.
Let's see if I was hoping to
Yeah,
find your
there's
bridge.
a couple different. There's a couple.
So there, I
So
like that
you
image
can
there.
see right there. There's so that's one of the models I was able to build in person, but only because I was commissioned for it by the City of Hancock. So for those of you listening, it is a model of the Portage Lake Lift Bridge. It may or may not be up at the Hancock City Hall, but I know it was on display at Bridge Fest a couple years ago, as well as the Houghton County Fair. But as you can see in the back, I worked on the software, designed it for a month or so before before we ordered the parts. So I would say definitely if you're thinking on the larger end of trying to make models, once you get through playing around with creator sets, it would be a good place to look as well.
And in digital building, right? I mean, it's free, so you have the whole set of Lego elements within the software.
Yeah.
There's sometimes there may be a little bit of lag before they update it, but so you can, in this case, I love Tucker's lift bridge, right? So he built that using the digital, and then there are Lego aftermarkets where you can buy specific pieces. So you wouldn't have to try to source this by buying a bunch of sets that have pieces that you don't need. You can make very specific orders that you can get a parts list right from digital design. And I don't do any digital. I've played with it, but I can't do it. For me, I got to be tactile touching the brakes. But yeah, I envy him because he's got really great skills on the digital design stuff.
Yes. Well, so if you aren't designing things, in a software like a CAD software, what does your design process look like? Like how much, like, are you doing any sketching, or is it just emergent, or do you have an idea in your head? Like, what does that look like for you?
So for me, I'll have an idea and usually an inspiration. So, I showed you that Grand Central Station, which I had a couple ideas. And I probably had some, you've seen my bulletin board, right? I have pictures that I print out just so I can sort of see things. One of these in here, I don't know if we can see it or not.
Yeah, you can. It shouldn't move now if you want to find it.
Is this right here was a house that we used to live in. We built that house when we lived in North Carolina. And so, but then, if you looked at the house we lived in, there is some differences. So I also sort of, as I'm building and trying things out, trying to follow that inspiration, I don't force reality into my, if I can make things look a little bit better or deviate a little bit within the Lego medium, I'll do that. But it's really trial and error.
Yeah, maybe.
How do you sort your bricks?
That's a very good question. See, I sort by part and then by color, if I can.
Okay, so I sort only by color, and the main reason, admittedly, is because it's easier.
Fair enough.
But what I find is when I sort by color, if I'm trying to find a 1x8 gutter plate in the light bluish gray, and light bluish gray is a color that you get a lot of, so I have tons of these. So I'm sorting through it, and I might find some other piece, like, oh, what I could do is I could take 4 of these 1x2s that have this on it, and that might look a little bit better. And so what I find when I'm sorting my color, I force myself to see other elements, and I might find better ways of doing things. But it's not efficient. And for any of you who watch Lego Masters, I mean, the creations they make are amazing.
Yes.
But the fact that they do it in 10 hours, that house right there took me 2 weeks.
Yeah. All mine are stored in grocery bags, so I'm not that cool. So you talked about doing CAD to generate parts lists, but where else? So you also talked about getting bulk parts on Alibaba and things like that. But there's also the big site. What's the name of the big site that has
Bricklink.
Bricklink.
Bricklink, yeah.
Yep.
So what is Bricklink, and how might people interface with that?
Yeah, so Bricklink, as Dennis was mentioning, is where you can get a lot of secondary parts. You can even buy sets on there, both current and retired. Ultimately, it's a place really where you can go and get parts that you may need. In fact, that studio design program that I did mention is directly connected to Bricklink. So you can export parts lists from your builds that you create and upload them directly to Bricklink for them to generate a parts list that you can then source out, and they can actually do this for you as well, help allocate finding which quantity of parts are with which buyers for the best price. I do that a lot to try to help save money, especially working with clients. But yeah, so I'd say Bricklink is just a really great resource, especially if you know exactly what parts you want, but you don't want to buy a whole set just to get those parts.
But at its simplest, what Bricklink is just a web front end that connects people who want to buy Lego elements on the aftermarket to people who are willing to sell Lego elements on the aftermarket. So, Tucker or I, or maybe we could go in together, we could set up a store and would list our inventory. And then someone might have a parts list and they would put that parts list into Bricklink, or maybe they're just going to our store and shopping by items. And then, they check out and, it's sort of an e-commerce site at that point. There's another one called Brickowl. Have you ever used Brickowl?
Yeah, I have an account in there as well.
Okay,
They're also another great site for parts buying.
I've looked at it, but I've never used it. But Bricklink has evolved a lot in the time that I've used it, and was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, probably closer to 3 or 4 years ago, was purchased by the Lego Group.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's owned by Lego.
Own it, yeah.
And one of the things they have really done with it is try to expand the idea of Bricklink and AFOL generated creations, and so they now sell sets that have a lot less Lego design work in them, but are sets that people vote on, say, yeah, I'd like to buy that, and I'll pay, basically what would normally be normal retail plus a third for that set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tucker or I or someone else could design a set, and it could be vetted through that process, and it would be an official Lego set with the Bricklink branding and box.
Yeah.
Yeah, because didn't you just recently get one, like some station?
I got the Studgate station.
Yes,
So it's a sort of a classic European train station. It's really nice. It's too big for my city, unfortunately, so it's sitting underneath the city.
Hold up. So one of the things I like to do is, on the podcast episodes, is I'm going to ask you guys a question, and then we'll each pick an answer, and that's going to go on like a survey or whatever that'll be on Spotify, and so we'll see who agrees with who the most. And the question is this: you have to pick something that doesn't exist. What Lego model would you like to just poof into existence if you could pick one? Like what thing would you like to see a Lego model of the most?
I know my answer.
What's your answer?
So I grew up in Columbus, Indiana, which, if you know anything about Columbus, you know for one of two reasons. One, it's the headquarters for Cummins Engine Company. But two, it's a real mecca for post-war architecture. And it's really been a place that post-war emerging, up-and-coming modern architects went to make their bones. Saarinen, I.M. Pei, etc. And so I.M. Pei, who did the pyramid at the Louvre, many other amazing buildings throughout the world. One of his first buildings was, or not one of his first, but early on in his career, he designed the Cleo Rogers Memorial Library in Columbus. And it's classic mid-century, really stark lines, and it's very simple, and some very purposeful or deliberate asymmetry within it. Sort of all the hallmarks of mid-century. And I have built and rebuilt that building a few times. Lego doesn't make the right brick color, and it's all dominated by brick.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get the right scale.
Yeah.
And then outside of the Cleo Rogers Memorial Library is it's called the Large Arch, but it's this very organic sculpture that was done by the famous sculptor Henry Moore, the English sculptor. And so the Cleo Rogers Memorial Library with Moore's Large Arch out front is what I want someone to create, and
Gotcha.
I just take my money.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. What about you, Tucker?
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in Michigan my whole life pretty much. Even if not up here, I've been in the area. And one of the most famous landmarks here in Michigan is the Mackinac Bridge. And you could also say Mackinac Island. And I've built the Portage Lake Lift Bridge, but I have never attempted to build the Mackinac Bridge or Island yet. If someone could make that, that would be incredible.
What scale would you want to see it at? Just out of curiosity, because I feel like
Yeah.
it could be like the way the Eiffel Tower was, and be like a huge thing, or a little desk thing would be cool too.
So I would say just for my money and for rest of America's money, I would probably want it at a similar scale to say the model that you saw earlier, sort of like a Lego architecture style, like maybe less than 2 feet, possibly.
Yeah.
But I definitely also want like a little miniature version of Mackinac Island off to the side that you could see, and maybe even a little ferry that's sculling along the water towards it. I just feel like, not just for me, but for anyone who grew up in Michigan or has been through Michigan, they would probably want that too.
Just to
What about
diverge.
you?
Well,
Yeah.
Well, hold up. I want to say my piece of love for the Mackinac Bridge. Like, because I was thinking like, what would happen first? Would it be the Mackinac Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge? It'd probably be the Golden Gate Bridge. And that's one of the reasons why I love the Mackinac Bridge so much, is because it's this amazing, impressive structure that connects two tiny towns. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is part of like a major highway and all that. But I love the Mackinac Bridge for so many reasons, and that's one of them. That it's like this. I don't want to say underused because it's a lot of traffic, but it's just in this like such rural area, and that I don't know. It's always had this like level of like almost mystery to me. But anyway,
And Lego has done a Golden Gate.
Yes,
they have?
And so what
Okay.
Lego does on the architecture line are these cityscapes. And they're kind of two-dimensional cityscapes. They got a little bit of third dimension.
I
And the
collect them
San
in my
Francisco
office.
one, it's got the painted ladies, those Victorian houses. It's got whatever the modern spired skyscraper in downtown San Francisco is called.
Yeah.
And then it's got the Golden Gate Bridge with Alcatraz off to the side.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So it does exist in really small
Yeah,
scale.
it's I mean the whole thing's like this. So the Golden Gate, but it's done really cleverly in forced perspective.
Yeah.
And so they're making as you're looking, supposed to be looking farther off, things get smaller. So it looks like it's going.
Yeah. I have one of those. We got one. It was like a postcard from New York. And
I have.
Yep. Anyways, so
do you know what you would build?
Yeah, so I know what it would be, and it's something that I have some minor aspirations. So one of these days I might bug you, but my dad has this project that I've kind of helped out on a little bit, and so what it is it's an 1800 steam shovel that so it was underwater, and I don't know if you guys followed, like there was like 3 or 4 years ago there was this catastrophic dam failure.
Yeah, the Sanford flood.
Yep. So all this flooding and all that stuff, and so the short story is that my grandpa was going to try and take it out sometime in the 70s. He was going to like try and pull it out of the water because he knew it was down there. It was left when they built the dike and all that. Anyways, lost interest, went on to something else, and then all this flooding happened, and it's really tragic because a lot of people's houses flooded and all that. But also, it revealed the steam shovel. And my dad and uncle went to go look at it just for some closure because they were little kids when their dad was looking for it. Anyways, and then my dad got the scheme, like, or the idea, because he's a heavy machinery mechanic, and so he was thinking, I could rebuild this, right? And so he's doing it, right? Like he's got the wheels all refurbished and all that stuff. If anyone's interested in looking at more, you can go on WixomLakeSteamShovel.com and see some of the pictures. Anyways, I think I want it to exist because I think it would mean a lot to him if I could get like a recreation of that steam shovel just to show him. And so it would be kind of a cool Technic historical piece,
That's cool.
Yeah.
One thing that you do hear from the community a lot that they wish Lego would do, but Lego's never got the IP. Some of its competitors have the IP. Is Star Trek. So Lego
Yeah.
obviously has Star Wars, and the Star
Yeah.
Wars IP has been
Yeah.
a real, it coincided with sort of the rebirth of the company where they nearly went bankrupt in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But they've never gotten Star Wars. So people want, or Star Trek. So people, they want a Romulan ship, or they want, they want the Enterprise, or things like that.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and like when you watch like the Lego movie, like they like super flaunt it to the extreme. The amount of IP that Lego has, it's so crazy. Like when it was like Dumbledore talking to Gandalf, like so funny, and so awesome. There's no company like it that has that much IP that I'm aware of, right?
I don't know if I can think of anyone who does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not all their IP bets have paid off. They did a bunch of sets for the Lone Ranger movie, and that bombed, right?
Yeah.
And so there's been a few that haven't worked out, and sets don't get very long shelf lives when that happens and things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so at Michigan Tech, one of the things that I find is, I don't want to say universal, but it's a large percentage, is if I talk about Dungeons and Dragons, right? At least I find my students, it's about 40% of students have at least played Dungeons and Dragons. So it's a large common denominator. Another one is Legos, right?
Yes.
And so have you like, do you have that in your pocket of like I can always talk about Legos with students or things like that? Or I know that's one of my things that I know, like students will come into my office and see Legos and be like, oh, I have the Millennium Falcon, and then talk about it, and it's always a good icebreaker, I don't know if you guys have similar things with that.
Yeah, so I actually teach a composition class right now, and it's themed around toys, games, and play. And so we often do talk about Lego in that class, and I use it as a way to help show students that, hey, I'm like you, I have different interests, I have different hobbies, and additionally, it's okay to explore those different hobbies even in school. Especially with learning. It doesn't always have to be about engineering, or doesn't always have to be about the sciences or arts. Like, you can just enjoy your hobby, and then later on you can realize, oh, these elements of engineering are involved, or these parts of science can be used to help make me enjoy my hobby even more. And so I've used it also not just as like a way of breaking the ice with students, but kind of like really helping them engage with their interests in a way. So it becomes like a gateway tool for me, especially connecting with students.
Yeah, because you've been using it for like your master's study, right? Like,
yes.
What does that look like?
So right now, it's still under review, but my plan is to have my students engage in 4 activities where they're based off of the 4 core assignments that the class is currently built upon. And they would be answering prompts by using Lego bricks in order to create their own models. They have like about 200. At the end, they would talk about their models a bit. They would also be writing a reflection, talking about how they thought about the process of building the model, how they connected the prompt to the model, what skills do they think that they've picked up on, especially in terms of if they're talking about a build that they've created, or if they're using the parts to brainstorm ideas, or using them to find resources, such as like with our anti-bibliography assignment. So the bricks in a way then become a bridge in a sense. They bridge concepts that may not otherwise be tangible to students.
Yeah, I remember you gave a talk at the teaching learning conference last summer, and it made me think, and I still want to implement this, of the idea of combining play with teaching.
Yes.
And I really like the idea of using something like Legos, or I really thought of like Play-Doh, to try and somehow describe an abstract concept. Like, so I teach like a class in microcontrollers where right now, as I'm teaching it, I'm going through all the different instructions about how you logically and things and add things and shift things and stuff like that. And I really want to do this. I just need to bite the bullet and buy a bunch of Play-Doh. but I want to say like give everyone a random instruction and then say make this instruction out of Play-Doh. And then you just got to think, like, how could I possibly represent addition with Play-Doh or shifting things or comparing things? I think it would be just a fun, like, Friday assignment at the end of class or something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Nilofer Onder is one of our faculty members in College of Computing. And I think she does this in the algorithms course, which is a core CS course. But in every class, the students have to make some sort of diorama, visual aid, in some cases sort of metaphor of one of the algorithms that they studied in the class.
Yeah.
And she shared several of them with me that students have done over the years, and it's just absolutely amazing what students can do when they take these really complex ideas and then recast them into some sort of physical world or two-dimensional representation, et cetera.
Yeah.
And to your point, Lego is often used as a metaphor for sort of computing problems, right? Take big problems, pull apart into small problems. I mean, the whole idea of some of the really simple, drop and drag programming languages are basically built on that idea.
Yeah. And so, what about you, Dennis? In terms of using Lego as a connection thing with people, or
not as much. It's been a while since I've actually been in the classroom. And so I was just thinking about that recently. It's been since 2016.
That's a long time.
Yeah. So, but for me, in my office, I do have a sign, a three-dimensional sign that I built out of Lego that's nice and framed. It's Michigan Tech, and it's got lots of greebling, which is a Lego word for just adding detail for the sake of detail. Make it look techy. But it says Michigan Tech, and it's got a couple of minifigs representing sort of the various aspects of life in the Keweenaw and Michigan Tech students, and people will come in. It's sort of the first thing they see, and so it's a nice little icebreaker. We'll talk about that.
Sure.
I didn't do that intentionally, but I
found it just works that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's kind of, I actually did do that intentionally, the cannon in my office. It's kind of like, so that was my grandpa, Moose, I was talking about that, was trying to get the steam shovel. He did the casting for that. My uncle did the woodwork, and it's been sitting at my grandma's house for a while, and so it's one of those like instant conversation starters. Anyways,
that's cool.
What's your favorite piece in your collection? And I guess you could take this a couple ways. Or you mean like individual piece, or like the whole assembly.
Yeah. I know if you want me.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
All right. So mine is a very simple element, and it's what they call this gutter piece. So it's a modified. So a plate is the thinnest elements that Lego makes. So it's one stud high. And this is a modified 1x plate. They make them in 1x8s and 1x2s, and it's got this little gutter piece, and it's meant to represent sort of the gutter of a house. But because I do a lot of architectural building, what I often use this piece for is because it protrudes out in a dimension orthogonal to going up and down, so it's sticking out. It just adds a little detail, and so I can just use it for a gratuitous little splash of detail that's really subtle. And I got a bunch of them, but I just love this element. I overuse it. I end up using it way too much, and so recently I've been trying to force myself to do other things.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so for mine, it's a bit different. So I really enjoy the 1x2 mason bricks. So as in these bricks have a brick sort of texture on top of them, which is actually raised a bit so you can see the grooves inside. But I really like is that you can flip them around and there's another texture that's just one single groove running down
through the plank, kind of.
Through the plank, just flat. And so I really like about those bricks is that you can use them to represent masonry, of course, but then you can also not just use them for walls, but you can mount them onto the side, laying flat, and then I've used them to try and make roads. I've seen people do that as well. And if you flip the brick over to show the one side with that single groove running through horizontally, you could use that to create more detail, more texture.
Yeah.
And so I think it's versatile in that regard.
Yeah.
And there's a similar element, which is a 1x2 brick that has the textured lines horizontal on one side and vertical on the other. I forget what they call that element.
Yeah.
But I end up using that one a lot as
That
well.
one's a good one.
And I also what I end up doing is doing a checkerboard of them.
Yes.
And so because they have like these little grooves that go vertical or these little grooves go horizontal, they catch light in interesting ways.
Yeah.
Especially when you checkerboard it like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I see right there. I've got my Seinfeld,
Yes,
and he's got
yeah.
those bricks that you're talking about. And I intentionally, like, my wife had said, how come you didn't put it next to Seinfeld's like apartment that I have in my office? But I intentionally put it by the Millennium Falcon just because, once again, that IP crossover. Like, I think it's really funny. Like, what's the deal with Chewbacca? You know, like,
Yeah.
So but your question sort of gets at a really sort of fundamental Lego concept, and in fact, occasionally on the Lego Masters they utilize this idea, and it's the creative part usage.
Yeah.
And so AFOLs, again, an adult fan of Legos, love this idea of taking an element that was meant for one thing and using it in some completely random new way.
yeah.
And I did bring one example of that. And so for those of you who can't see, I got a couple of these little flower pieces that have 4 petals on them. One's in green to represent the base, and then one's in sort of a purplish color to represent the flower. And then in this case, what they've done is they've used a Technic axle going through, which goes through those 2 elements and holds them together. And then this piece right here was a broom. And so we were debating before we started, we're trying to remember, was this piece for the broomsticks or Harry Potter, or maybe it was for the brooms from the Sorcerer's Apprentice, or maybe both. But they've used it as, what do they call this? I guess that's the stigma of the plant, right? It's the piece that's protruding away from the petals. I don't know my flower anatomy very well. But anyway, I mean, it's you never would have thought to do that, right? And so it's just, Lego nerds really geek out about things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that, and then also like this kind of sparked my memory about what was the big castle that was like sold, like came on the market like 2 years ago? I own it, and I know that doesn't help you, but
the 90th anniversary castle.
Yeah, the 90th anniversary.
So they call that the
Lion Knights.
The Lion Knights Castle.
Lion Knights Castle. Yeah. Anyways, and so
that's a great set.
it's
a great set.
Yeah, I know. I really like that set. I felt dirty spending all that money on it, but it made me. It was like, I personally like to spread my builds out. Like I don't like try to like get them all done all at once. I'll like, pace it out, and it was just like a consistent source of joy. But anyways, 2 things. One is just like you were saying, that creative part use, like finding like, oh God, you like these parts that you're familiar with and seeing them used in weird ways, but also. With big sets like that, and even small sets now, I'm noticing more like the Easter eggs that you get. Like there was like a solid piece of terrain on that castle, and as you're building it, you're putting in little gold nuggets that no one is ever going to see because it's completely encapsulated in the part. I just love that because it's like, it's almost like not only does the finished model tell a story, but as you build the model now, it's telling the story, which it's like I get chills just thinking about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and taking that idea and extending it just a little bit, one of my personal favorite things to do is, so I have a large city, and really the city is, it's the key elements of it are the buildings, and it's a combination of mostly Lego sets, but also mocks, and we've not defined what a mock is, but it's my own creation, so something that I build out of my own imagination. So I have the city and the landscaping, but it's the Easter eggs. It's the Mr. T minifig walking down the street. It's the little kid who dropped his ice cream cone who's got a mad face, right? I mean, I decorate the whole city, with all these little Easter eggs throughout. That the little things of storytelling.
And
And so, Tucker's been to my house, and I bored him to tears as I was sort of, and then I did that over here, and I did that.
Well,
Yeah.
I always enjoy going over because it always changes. You always change up the Easter eggs too.
Yeah.
Like I just really enjoy just how much fun you have with the city.
I always wondered, like, if this is intentional, and maybe you guys know this, like, in the Lego manuals, they tell you how to do, how to make the entire set, but they never tell you where to actually put the minifigs, right? And so I almost wonder if that's like an invitation to do just like what you were saying, Dennis, of like, think it out and like have that storytelling of like, well, where should they go? Where would it make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I never thought of that because they always usually tell you to build the minifig when you first tear into that set of bags.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because Tucker mentioned that I just did this Studgate set, which was this Bricklink designer set, and it did not have nearly the quality control within it. And so it was not designed for sort of the most economical amount of parts. Like some Lego sets it's sort of amazing what they can get to with so few parts to bring down cost. But in that set, you would build the minifigs often midway through that set of bags, and then they would tell you where to put it. And I had never seen that before. Like I'd never seen, like, put it on that stud, okay. But then later on they had some pictures where things are moved around, the minifigs are moved around. But they did say, put it here. And so I don't know, I assume those manuals are generated automatically from the designer files. And so presumably that's where they were in there, and that's just got rolled up into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any Lego horror stories? Like, cause I know, Dennis, you've like gone to like a couple shows. Like, have you ever had like anything bad happen?
I've actually only done one. I was going to go to another, but work got in the way. But no. I mean, we've all dropped sets and had them break, and then you kind of end up rebuilding.
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, I've moved and I've moved the city from North Carolina to Kansas, from Kansas to here, and each time the move, things break, but I'm always surprised at how much things don't break.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call that a horror story. It's sort of better than I expected. But there is a YouTuber, Alex Nunes, who we both watch as we're nerding out watching YouTube about Lego, and his city is 5 times as big as mine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's giant, and he's known for having one of the biggest cities out there. But at one point, many years ago, his wife had, before they refinished his basement, she was having someone come in and like dust the HVAC ducts, and his whole city had just dust like this high over the whole. He makes this video about it. I mean, you just, I mean, he was somewhere between just crushed, crestfallen, and mad as hell. I mean, it was just,
That's really funny. I think, or I guess, Tucker, do you have any like horror stories? Or?
So I'd say I don't have like one single event, but it's more like several that happen, and it's with brittle parts.
Oh yeah,
So,
I hear like the dark brown is notoriously brittle.
The reddish brown, I love the color, but I hate how easily it can break over time. Also a dark red as well. And so for me, one of the worst things that can happen in a physical build that I'm doing is that I'm going to remove it, or I'm going to place it in, and then it just breaks.
Yeah.
Like just the slightest little touch, especially if they're from several years ago. And I think it's just like a plastic thing, but it just always fills me with dread when it happens.
Yeah.
But the new browns are not.
No,
the new reddish browns are not near as bad as the old.
No.
I mean, we call them brittle brown.
Yeah. But still, you can come across those parts that it's never fun when they break on you.
And the dark reds, they have real quality control issues because the shades vary so much.
They can.
Yeah.
Huh.
So for me, when it happens, it's just like every single time.
Yeah.
Just.
My story of, and like you said, we've all dropped models. I've actually only really had one model like fall, and it was the Millennium Falcon there, and it was an undergrad, and I didn't have a lot of space, but I had like my electronics workbench in the basement of the house that we're living in, and then I had like a shoe shoe shelf thing, and it was used for like components, and on top of that I had the Millennium Falcon, and it was a kind of partially unfinished basement. Anyways, and I came home one day and whoosh, all over the place, and it was the cat, of course, right? So what Darth Vader couldn't do, my cat, he could do it. He could take out the blink hog. But it was interesting because that actually, so my roommate who lived like on the other side of that, it was like a little finished room in the basement. He lived on the other side of that, but he was gone. It's a long story, but he was like in the hospital for a while, and so no one was going in that room. And then so I ended up putting the whole Millennium Falcon back together, and I think I put it in a different spot, or I can't remember what I did. But then like a few weeks later, my cat jumps back up there, and then I see him go zoop into the drop ceiling into that room, and I'm like, Seal, no! And I opened the door, and the drop ceiling was all already crushed and out of shape. And anyways, yeah, that was my double kind of horror story, I guess.
So you reminded me of, actually, I do have one horror story, and I have my wife and I have one son. He's now 13, and at the time he was probably 8 or 9, something along those lines. And my wife calls me, and she's like, "You're going to be upset when you get home."
It's not the plot to the Lego movie, is it?
That's a different story.
Okay.
Let me come back to that. So she's like, "You're going to be upset." I'm like, "Okay, what happened?" And she's like, Max and Jack were downstairs playing in the Lego City. I'm like, "Oh, okay." And they destroyed it.
Oh.
And Max to this day blames Jack. But it was a good thing that they weren't home. I'd sort of steeled myself for it by the time I got home, and did not expect the amount of damage they had done. And it emotionally hit me way harder than I expected it to. I mean, I was, again, somewhere between really, really mad and really, really just sort of crushed, and
I can imagine.
was sort of vacillating back and forth between the two. But yeah, that's, many years later, it's a funny story to tell. But at that time, when we watched the Lego movie, for the first time, we saw it live in the theater, back when people went to theaters. And we didn't know sort of the great reveal at the end. And I'm not going to ruin anything for people who are listening in if you've not seen it, but watch it. It is a legitimately good movie. But then when the great reveal happens, Lauren sort of leans over and looks at me and just sort of shakes her head. Like,
That's funny.
Yeah.
I gotta check our time here. So, I think another important thing that in Legos and just making in general, so I'm kind of like a champion for making, but I think something I want to say is it's okay to just get Legos out and just build stuff, and you don't have to make this amazing castle, or you don't have to make the Eiffel Tower. You can just put bricks together, and so that's like a thing that I've tried to show my daughter. She's 3 years old now, and of course we have Legos, and so last Christmas I remember just randomly putting things down and basically making it look like abstract art, just to show it doesn't have to be anything. You can just do like goofy things. And then it was so cool because all of a sudden this abstract stuff I was putting, she's like, "This is a sink," because I think it had one little hoop piece. And then all of a sudden she started identifying it as different house parts, and so it was so cool. But I want to say that to anyone that wants to play with Lego but might be intimidated because they see the work that other people do. You don't have to do that. You can just make try and make a little pizza or whatever it turns out to be,
Well said.
Yeah.
And there are times when I just grab elements and start putting them together. For those of you who can't see this is just a series of bricks of different colors that I was just playing around with color, just trying to, and sometimes I'll be doing these little ideas or nuggets of an idea, and ultimately, I've come back and used these colors together, ones I think that worked well together, right? So sometimes you take some of these things that you've done just by playing around and incorporate them into something bigger, which is back to the idea of design and building and making, right? It's hierarchical. say one more thing. I have no problem saying that I play with Legos.
Yeah.
Some adults are a little squeamish or a little,
Apprehensive, yeah.
Better word, around the idea of playing. You're supposed to be, you're an adult, you're supposed to be serious. And there's a NBA basketball player who plays for the Pacers. I forget his name. Miles Brand, is that his name?
Maybe.
Anyway, he's a big AFOL. And he was asked about this in an interview, and it went throughout the whole Lego community. And he's like, well, let me start off by saying one thing. I build with Legos. I don't play with Legos.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it's, to me, they're the same thing. But it's, it is a medium for building and creation.
Yeah.
And with things like Technic, which we've touched on here and there, you can build really complicated machines.
Yeah.
And do some really amazing things that are very mechanical.
Yeah, it's interesting because I teach an intro to robotics class, and they have an objective right now that it's basically one of these GoPros that I'm filming with, and it's a competition across lab sections where they need to make a robot that can achieve an X, Y, Z roll, pitch, yaw, and so the more axes that you can control given your budget, blah 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 blah. Anyways, and I had one team say can we use Lego? Can we use Technic? And as a prototyping platform, it's actually not a bad idea. I mean, you could also use 3D printing or woodworking, all that stuff. But the nice thing with Legos is prototyping like a physical device like that is you can pop things apart and change things. So I'm excited to see if they go that route or not.
Well, and the whole first robotics, right? I mean, so the Lego is in a lot of different ways tried to blur the lines between their products and a digital medium.
Yeah.
And so they have a control system for the Lego robots, and they have, all sorts of, they played around with augmented reality as well, and they've definitely spent a lot of time building Lego video games that sort of describe the features of the physical Lego building experience. So for me as a computing guy, I love that sort of, that digital connection.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I actually, funny you mentioned that, Dennis. Do you know the Lego Builder app at all?
No.
Have you heard of it?
Wait, is it the AI thing where you can
Yeah.
take a picture? You can take a picture of bricks, yeah.
Oh, well, I was like, but on the actual, there's a Lego instruction sort of app, and on there they have for some of the sets, they have a 3D model per step that you can go through and then change the different views.
See the orientation, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Well, what I was thinking of is I've seen this app that it's you take a picture of a bunch of Legos and it will generate a set of instructions for you to make something with those. I can't remember the name of the app, but yeah, it's kind of an interesting machine vision AI thing.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people are using generative AI right now, taking real objects in real life and then Legofying them. And so it's some sort of ChatGPT generative image creation thing.
I'm a bit mixed because on one hand, I see it as great inspiration, perhaps, but I know some people try to pass it off as Lego, or they'll try to just say, this is Lego art, and at the same time, people that do make Lego creations, that play with Lego creations, can get annoyed with that, because to them, it's not really so much as creating something, but rather just generating ideas.
Yeah, I mean,
And so for me, it's kind of mixed that way. I think it could be a great inspiration tool, but some people may just use it as, here you go, the end-all product, even though there may be more work to be done.
Well, many of the things that they've generated, many of the Lego-ifications in those generative are not things that could actually physically be realized in real
No,
life.
of course not, yeah.
But having said that, I mean, it's pretty cool, and I'm a big advocate for digital AI-inspired art, as well as my favorite medium, other than Lego, is traditional plein air painting. So, I mean, art evolves and media evolve.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And shameless plug, soon we'll be having our second annual In Silico Art show, sponsored by the College of Computing and the Institute for Computing and Cyber Systems.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I want to make an entry to that. I want to do something that's electrical and involves light and sound.
Okay.
I wanted to make one last year. I just didn't.
There was an interactive one last year.
Yeah.
Sort of an interactive, I think it was the Dean response bot.
Oh yeah, I'd seen that. Yeah.
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 I tried not to take that one personally.
Yeah.
And then there, and then some of them was even as simple as it was the husky dog done in ASCII art.
Yeah.
So the whole gamut of
Yeah.
what people could do.
Yeah.
One of our students did a generative art of what Houghton would look like in the year 2010 or something.
Interesting.
2100 or whatever. I don't know what
Yeah.
the year was, but some in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Interesting.
Anyway,
The last question I want to ask you is, which album do you recommend someone listens to after listening to this podcast, after listening to this episode? It doesn't have to be to do with Lego, but what would it be?
has nothing to do with Lego, but as I mentioned before, I grew up in Columbus, Indiana. I actually grew up halfway between Columbus, Indiana, and Seymour, Indiana. And if you know anything about Seymour, Seymour was the small town that John Mellencamp grew up in. And I've been a closeted Mellencamp fan most of my life. Recently, back in 2023, he did a new album, Orpheus Descending, which Bob Guncione Jr. of Spin called the album of the year. And it's the most powerful social commentary since Bob Dylan. It's in his later years, his voice has gotten much sort of stronger and darker and smokier, and he's much more of a bluesy feel to his music these days. In fact, one of his albums, a few albums ago, was produced by T-Bone Walker. But this album, check it out. It's amazing.
Interesting. Well, hold up though. I do want to talk. So, the idea of being a closeted music fan, actually, or of a certain music, in the last episode we recorded with Jim and Jared, we talked a lot about music, and I talked about this thing about how I would be like ashamed to like listen to some music, and then I like hit this point where I was like, it's so stupid to be ashamed of anything that you listen to, So like, why do you?
Why closeted? Like,
Yeah.
Some of his older stuff was very poppy.
Yeah.
It's kind of kitschy, right? It was John Cougar.
Yeah.
But it was actually quite good. And when I say I often will say that I'm a closeted NASCAR fan as well.
Yeah.
Everyone who knows me knows I love John Mellencamp. Everyone knows me I love NASCAR. And me saying that I'm closeted is just sort of a way of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I get why you might.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I see.
I actually don't really hide it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. In the closet, but the door's open.
Yeah,
kinda.
exactly. There we go.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so for me, the album name is escaping my mind, but it's the album that comes right after Pink Floyd's The Wall. After Roger Waters left the group, after how successful The Wall was, and kind of just it just became so much. But the album that came after has some really great tracks on it. I feel it's very underrated, very mellow, but at the same time it has a punch to it. I know the track that sold me on that album was "Learning to Fly," if you've heard of it.
Probably a lot of Pink Floyd stuff. I've heard the music, but I just don't know the names of the songs.
Yeah, I would say I'm trying to remember the album name right now, but it's one that "Learning to Fly" is on. I would definitely recommend that one, especially as a way of kind of winding down and just relaxing and just letting the music just let you drift away.
What do you listen to when you build?
Let me think. It's kind of a bit mix of like rock and country, honestly.
Okay.
Just kind of mellow stuff.
A momentary lapse of reason.
Momentary lapse reason. That's
yep.
yes. That one I definitely recommend. I think it's pretty underrated.
To answer your question, I do like if I'm building like a Star Wars set, or like it's like Star Wars, I listen to Star Wars soundtrack, or if I'm building like the castle, it'd be like Renaissance music. And I was watching like a bunch of like medieval movies and things like that.
Okay.
So yeah, I try to get into like the whole
You got the
theme.
Princess Bride on as you're watching.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll see. For my project right now, I've been listening to sort of a lot of Gordon Lightfoot to say.
Oh, nice.
So kind of like sort of Great Lakes inspired music, kind of like sort of country, sort of very
Wait, so
mellow.
you're trying to say that you're building the Mackinac Bridge? It's a secret right now, but you're building it.
Well,
right?
it may not be the Mackinac Bridge, but it'll be a Great Lakes related thing for certain. So it will be by the water.
Very cool.
So
So what about you? Favorite album or album you recommend given this conversation?
Oh man, it changes every day. But like as a general recommendation, it would be The Will to Death, and it's by a musician called John Frusciante. He's more commonly known as the guitarist for Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
He has a solo work that so he had an addiction to heroin and when he kind of started his solo work, and so a lot of his early solo work can be really hard to listen to, but it's one of those things that you can listen to it and there's some really interesting ideas, but you gotta, it's one of those things that I might keep closeted if you were to say closeted. But anyways, but his later stuff, he really comes in, and yeah, there's this song, and now I can't remember the name of the song, which is really embarrassing because it's my favorite song ever. But he has a song on it that doesn't have like the traditional like structure of like verse, chorus, verse, or whatever. It's like almost like a poem, but it's got like a really cool like mellow solo that he's known for. Now I gotta find the name of the song. Yes, so that's like my go-to, but I'm always listening to music. Let me find the name of the song. The Will to Death is the album. Oh, not Cloud Emoji. Why would it type that? The Will to Death. Yes, Unchanging is the name of the song. So
Unchanging, okay.
yeah, I highly recommend listening to it.
Gotcha.
Cool.
Anyways, thank you,
Shane, thanks
so
for having
much.
us.
Yeah, thank
Yes,
you.
I'm so happy that you were locked in my office talking about Legos. Super duper fun. And
Absolutely.
thank you very much.
So for the community, real fast, we did this. I did this in this September of 2 years ago. So September 21, I had an open house at my house and sort of opened it up, and a few people who I'd never met before came by. But I do plan on having a Lego open house for the city, and the whole top floor of my house is dedicated to Lego. So that there's sets that I've collected as well.
yeah.
So that will be, I don't know, late February, March, something along those lines.
In the future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I'm not. I probably won't put it in the paper or anything, but
Yeah.
if you're interested,
Yeah.
shoot me a note. I'm easy to find, and
Okay.
I'll let people know.
You can already, if you don't mind, put me down.
Oh,
I'd be more than
absolutely.
happy.
Yeah, Tucker, I gotta have you there.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Excellent. All right. Well, peace out, everybody.
Cheers.